Hello, my name is Dale Deerdorf and welcome to Module 3 or Week 3 in SLD Solution Design 904. Now this week's course lecture is going to be on one of your textbooks. So this week what I want to do is I want to walk through, or this module what I want to do is I want to walk through some of the highlights, some of the areas that I think are really important that we don't want to gloss over from one of your course books. And this course book is our HBR, our Harvard Business Review Entrepreneur's Handbook. This handbook is one that I think that you should keep with you for many years to come. It's a great book, great read, tons of great information in here as you're going through it. But I think one of the most important things that they talk about, the perspective of this book, is that they want you to prepare for the journey. So they are going to walk you through a journey, what it takes for you to take an entrepreneurial, I'll call it business, to launch it, to grow it, what all the components of it are. And they break those down into separate elements that we're going to talk about. Those are the areas that I want to kind of focus on for you. Let me go ahead and get started here. Let's go ahead and starting the business. So the first idea that you have, or the ideas, are important elements. You've got to have a starting point. And typically that is, I have got a great idea. I've got an idea that nobody else has. I've got something that nobody else has thought of. And the way that we really understand that, or the way that we do that evaluation, is that I'll call it our personal background may be wired differently than other people, and it may be because of our beliefs, our actions, our behaviors. But the big thing is that mindset, that entrepreneurial mindset, the ability from a paradigm standpoint to think differently, to see things differently, our inclinations, our motivation, and our skills. Those are the key areas that you must have as an entrepreneur. So it takes more than just ideas. It takes skills. It takes motivation. It takes being able to not be paralyzed by paradigms. You've got to have that entrepreneurial mindset, and those what we refer to as beliefs, actions, and behaviors have got to be succinctly aligned with entrepreneurship, with where you want to go. Now, as we talk about taking that idea or that opportunity and then shaping it, there's a couple different ways to approach it. So we have what we refer to as a business opportunity, and then as we've described previously and you've heard over and over again, we have something called an experiment. So the experiment is typically what a lot of people are running into, and you're going to see this kind of leads off of the first lecture that we had when we started talking about lean canvas, and we started talking about what that looked like from a lean perspective. Lean refers to everything as an experiment, and from an entrepreneurship standpoint, how that gives us the ability to lower our risk, help you really understand the customer needs and reactions to your solution before making a significant investment. That lean canvas template that we've talked about, the areas of it that you need to fill in, how important those are. Now, in addition to that, you've got another type of opportunity, which is that business opportunity. And with a business opportunity, there are going to be 5 separate areas that you really must understand. You must make sure that a business opportunity, number one, solves a real problem for your customers. It can't just be a fad. It can't just be something that is haphazardly thrown out there. You must solve a real problem. It must offer a significant risk-adjusted profit potential. That risk versus profit potential must drive yourself into a direction where you're willing to take the risk. It must fit well with the capabilities of the leadership team that you either have in place or that you're putting in place. And number 4 is potentially profitable over a reasonable time period. It can't be so long that by the time you achieve some level of profit, the market may have moved away from you. And then finally, 5 is amenable to financing, which means that other people, whether that's angel investors or whether that's banks or partners or other people, venture capitalists that are coming in to look at the opportunity, are willing and amenable to providing you financing for it. Now, as you're starting to build your business model, what that business model looks like, there's a couple key areas that you've got to really understand. That business model describes the entrepreneur's revenue sources. Where is the revenue going to come from? What are the cost drivers? The investment size and success factors. So as you're putting together the picture of what this is going to look like from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you've really got to paint that picture clearly when it comes to these particular areas. Finances, costs, the investment, all of those are so important. And then building upon that is also the strategy, your strategy differentiation, how it differentiates the enterprise and gives it its competitive advantage. How are you different from the other people out there? What makes you unique? What makes this the type of enterprise, the type of opportunity that other people will want to come in and invest in, that they see the potential also? Then they're going to talk about organizing your company. So let's move it to the stage where we've got a company now. Now, whether that is depending on if you've put together a sole source proprietorship, partnership, some level of limited corporation or limited liability company, you need to understand what the differences to that are. With a sole proprietorship, you own 100% of that company. You also own 100% of the accountability and 100% of the liability. Or you have other structures. So you have to think about what it is you want to put together for your company. So you're an entrepreneur, you've got the idea, now we have to organize the company. How do you want that company to be aligned? What should it look like? That sole proprietorship, as we list here, is the oldest and simplest. It's the most common form of a business entity. It really is one that most entrepreneurs, unless they're really, really successful and continuing to move and either pivot or spin off one company into another, most of them are looking at sole proprietorships or limited partnerships where you have other people that may have a little bit of stake in it, but you own 99% of it if you can from a sole proprietorship. Now, you're going to have to put together a business plan. So we've talked about understanding, what the idea, the opportunity is. Laying it out to the point where you can explain it to others is the business plan. We know what kind of company we want to have. We've talked about that. But now in that business plan, you need to be able to write an executive summary. And that executive summary is specific for entrepreneurs. It has to, I repeat, it has to, in compelling terms, explain what your opportunity is, why it's timely, and how your company plans to pursue it. What is the plan for pulling this together? The business plan's goals need to be identified. So the strategy based into goals, how are we going to achieve those goals, and how investors will eventually cash out. How will they make money working with you in this company? Now, as you see, we're starting to put together the entire picture. You're forming what your company looks like. You're forming the idea. You're shaping all the things. One of the big things now is going to be how do you get financing? Because startup financing, or what we refer to as startup stage financing, is tough. This is probably one of the hardest things you have to do because you have to sell not only yourself, the idea, the company, and the whole formula, but you need to sell the opportunity to somebody else. So the startup phase financing is initially what we call bootstrapped by you, and that means it's coming from personal savings, credit cards, loans that you may have from other people. You may even bring in family members in some cases, small bank loans. It's pieced together with whatever it takes to get it started. That's the startup side of it. And then other early sources that you can look at from a financing standpoint are going to be things that are online banking, accelerators and crowdfunding, Kickstarter type of activities. Those are other activities that can also help you with early sources of income or financing. Now, then we walk through the next phase, which is going to be the growth stage phase. This is where your idea, The opportunity and everything is now growing. You're in the growth phase from an entrepreneurial standpoint. That means you're looking to internally generate cash flows. We're trying to drive revenue through the company. This is going to require asset-based loans and external, I'll call it equity capital for financing. And when that happens, that means they really look at you. They're going to look clearly at the structure of the company, the people that are in the company, but it's going to be based upon your characters. Your character. Bankers are going to be looking for a borrower's ability to repay. So if you've had situations in the past where you've been delinquent, if you've had situations in the past where you have no faulted on previous loans, those are going to come into play, and they will look at that and potentially not give you the, I'll call it growth stage financing that you're looking for. They may have been willing to give you a limited amount in the initial side, but when we're talking about growing the company, making it bigger, your character comes into play. Now, there's another area that we keep hearing about, which are called angel investors or angel investing and venture capitalists. So what are angels? And I know a couple of them. I know, they've been around me and I've talked to them, and it's a very unusual situation. They have money and they can place it in different places, and it doesn't affect them as far as their ability to continue functioning with other companies they've got. But they are a specific and unique lot. They look at trying to get hooked up with entrepreneurs early, and they look at things that are high payoffs. So angel investors are high net worth individuals. That means they've got a lot of financial backing who provide early stage capital to start up businesses. They are people that are constantly being banged on by other people to give money. They are constantly being, phone calls, business plans put in front of them. If you have an opportunity to sit in front of an angel investor, you need to be able to take that business plan and succinctly show what the financial gains would be for them. Okay? Now we're going to talk about venture capital or venture capitalists. So venture capital comes from an individual or a firm that seeks large capital gains. That means they want to make quick money through early stage equity or equity linked financing of high potential entrepreneurial exercises. That means that the type of money that they're going to give you may have a higher interest than you could get from a bank, but they're going to give you a lot more money a lot faster in the front end when you might not be able to get it from other people, but you're going to have to pay more for that money. Okay? You need to make sure that, I love this third bullet, entrepreneurs should not waste their time pursuing venture capitalists unless they have the characteristics important to specific venture capitalists. Venture capitalists already know the market they want to go into. They already know the direction. They've really focused down into where they understand where they can make their money. So if you don't have the area, the focus, the type of technology that they're going to be looking for from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you may be wasting your time trying to talk to a venture capitalist. So make sure you really understand the type of area that you're going to be focusing on. Now the next area is going to be the going public side of it. The pipe dream for everyone. Everyone that is an entrepreneur always looks at things and says the pipe dream for me would be if we drive it into an IPO. An IPO is an initial public offering. It brings much needed cash initially to a growing company. It's a great thing to have happen. It is so hard to make happen. So your company has to really, really have a good, focused, I'll call it management team, leadership team. Everything's got to really be working well for the opportunity to be able to go public. This is where you have the opportunity to liquefy and diversify your wealth. Okay? The IPO is a pipe dream, as we call it here, for all but a few corporations. It really is something that doesn't happen as often as we think it does. And then the downside of the IPO is its expense. And the reason for that is it may, as we talk about here, just the process of trying to get your company to take off as an IPO is very, very expensive as far as time goes. You're absorbing, that absorbing management time, dilution of ownership, ongoing public scrutiny, and pressures to produce short-term gains one time after another is going to be consistent. It doesn't go away. It's something that will continue on and on and on, and it becomes very painful sometimes. So there are downsides to getting an IPO. Now that we've got that out of the way, now we're going to talk about how do we sustain entrepreneurial growth. So the company's taken off, we've got it funded, we're looking at how do we grow it? What does that growth look like? How do we make it sustaining from an entrepreneurial standpoint? Continued growth is usually a function of what we refer to as sustainable strategies, or a interconnected, interdisciplined strategy, one that is multifaceted and shows growth over I'll call it a technology curve, so that you have the ability to look at, where do I get into the market? Where do I have to get out of this? Where do I expand into another market? They're called S-curves, technology S-curves. And you really need to understand that to be able to move into additional markets. And as we refer to it here, provide the mechanisms for scaling up what we call the volume of output. How do we at a certain point double the output of what you're doing today? Is that sustainable? Could we do that? Or is that a one-time deal and then I'm sitting on so much inventory that I never get an opportunity to sell it? Then you have the other side of it. So from a growth side, you're trying to figure out what I'll call it the proper growth formula is, and then you're looking at scaling up. To scale up a business, you have to make changes to, I'll call it processes. You need to become more agile. There are certain things from a scaling up standpoint that really take someone that's got a lean background to come in and look at it. How can we make ourselves more effective and efficient? That's what we need to look at. You may have to put processes in place in places that don't have them currently, and you may have to establish guidelines. And typically in the front end of an entrepreneurial effort, there aren't that many guidelines. There aren't that many rules in the company. But as the company becomes bigger, as you grow it, you need to start putting those other areas in place. Now, the next area I'm going to talk to you about is leadership for a growing business. So we refer to it as the change. There are many, many entrepreneurs that cannot handle, I'll call it, their company gets to a certain size, it gets to a certain structure, and they have to look to either have somebody come in and help lead it, or they need to find a way to move on to another type of activity. It just becomes so hard for them. That entrepreneurial idea is to come in the beginning. It's exciting. It's getting everything to run. Once you have a functional company, the actions, behaviors, and attitudes that you used to get that company up and running are going to be very different than what it takes to sustain it and to keep it moving. So as we refer to it here, the challenge, growth challenges the founding management team whose members may lack the skills. So you may have to grow additional skills than what you currently have. Experiences or temperament for leading a larger, more complex organization. So Mark Zuckerberg, from when he started up Facebook versus where it has grown to now, he has been able to stay in that role. He's been able to accommodate that. There are not that many people. There's a handful of them. Jeff Bezos is one. Elon Musk is another. These are people that have been able to adapt and change not only their actions and behaviors, but almost shapeshift into a new type of leadership model that is required when you have a more complex organization. So, keeping the entrepreneurial spirit alive. What does it require for you to keep that spirit alive? Entrepreneurial leaders can keep the spirit alive if they, and here's a series of 7 different areas. If you can get this happening in your company, if you can keep this in the, as we refer to it, the experiment, the entrepreneurial experiment that you've got running, you need to preserve an innovation-friendly culture. It can't be so dogmatic that you are not willing to listen to new ideas. It's got to be an innovation-friendly culture. You need to establish strategic direction, and it may require that strategy to be, as I said, interconnected and show how it grows. You need a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. What are the strategies for that? Are the goals and objectives linked all the way through that? That requires a lot of, I'll call it, background information that you may not currently have. Business plans, KPIs, different, a balanced business card, things like that that are not typical for an entrepreneurial startup, but they are must-haves for companies that from a sustainability standpoint want to continue moving forward. You must remain personally involved with the innovation. And innovation, remember, is a process. And within that process, within the innovation process, there is a key element which is called creative thinking, lateral thinking, parallel thinking. All of those new thinking modes come out of that word innovation. But innovation is a process. You need to continually improve your idea to commercialization process. How do we take this idea? How do we commercialize it? Is it something we should explore? Is it something we could sell to somebody else? Is it something we could get somebody else to partner with us on? That whole ability to create a portfolio of thinking to, what I'll refer to your innovation efforts is essential. You will also need to hire additional people that have entrepreneurial attitudes. And you know what that is because you are an entrepreneur. You know what kind of attitudes you're looking for. These are people that might come in very early. They might work very late. They are very dogmatic in certain areas. You're looking for skills, actions, and behaviors that are exhibited that give you an understanding of what their entrepreneurial attitudes are. And then finally, you're looking to try to create an ambidextrous organization. Ambidextrous means that I am using all my hands at the same time. I'm doing multi-things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. It isn't like we only have to do one thing to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing. We are multifaceted and we can work using a lot of different things happening at the same time. That's what makes an entrepreneurial company. That's what keeps that entrepreneurial spirit alive. Now, in closing, I wanted to just kind of point out for you, when we start talking about entrepreneurs from the past through the present and into the future, what they look like. Okay? So if you take a look at the names on the list below me, these are the top 8 entrepreneurs. And at least 4 of them have passed away, all the way down to Thomas Edison. Okay? So number 1, Matthew Bolton. Okay? Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Edison. So we understand from an entrepreneurial standpoint when we get to there. And then there's this huge gap. Suddenly now number 4 becomes, guess who? Oprah Winfrey. So Oprah Winfrey, and she's only 56 years old. She's got another, 30 years to be able to continue her entrepreneurial efforts. Bill Gates. Bill Gates is behind Oprah. Larry Page, for many of you, you may not know who he is, so I want you to go off and look and see who he is. And then the same thing with Sergey Brin, because both of them are younger entrepreneurs. They're only 37 years old. So take a look at what we refer to as the top 8 here, or the top 10 entrepreneurs. There are others that are going to be out there that are going to fall directly in line below this, but it's amazing at what the names are and the areas that they're actually working in. Now, in closing, I want to point out that this last statement. Ideas are a thing. Opportunities, but opportunities as we generally understand them, are best addressed through business organizations formed by entrepreneurs. I know that you need to be an entrepreneur because you're taking this course, you're focusing in on all of the areas. The book that we're talking about, your textbook here, as you continue to unveil each chapter, as you continue to read the stories, as you continue to focus on each one of these areas, you're going to become stronger and stronger because you're going to recognize what activities you need to focus on and how to, I'll call it, reinforce the potential gaps you may have and exploit the strengths that you have. Okay? Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.